So I recently replayed the Planetary Launch Terminal on Ministry V8, and I say replayed. I'd played it on V7, but there were a lot of changes to this in V8, so it was significantly harder. I wanted to show you a few of the things that I did to help me beat it. Granted, I did not record the game when I played it, but I want to talk about some of the things that I did. That way you can see it without me having to be stressed about what I'm doing while I'm playing. Now, I've already beaten it, so I'm gonna go ahead and show you what the enemy base looked like in a different cut, and then we'll come back to this. All right, I figure I probably should show you what this looks like at the start, real quick, just to get you an idea of how big the enemy base is. So here's one of the first sides of the enemy base. Keep an eye on this map and see how much red there is in here. There's some enemy down there. Huge, pretty solid enemy base here with a core there. You can see some naval production there. Defenses along here, and then there's this very large defensive line all the way up and down here. There's no cores over here because the main core is up by all this production here where these naval factories are. And you've got the core, let's see, where is it? All the way up here. All right, so there's this huge line of specters, meltdowns, foreshadows, all these units here that you have to march through, and then the enemy has lots of production. Anyway, let's get you an idea of what you have to expect for this level. It's not the hardest level that you'll see, but it is a pretty intense level here. All right, now that you've seen what the enemy base looks like, let me talk about what I did here for my base. Now, this level has you start off with a row of salvos here. There's a specter down below, a few solar panels, and this drill. Not much in the way of defenses, but something that you can start with, right? It'll defend you for the first little bit. Now, the enemy does an attack for about 10 minutes, and so I had a little bit of time to build. So, first thing I did to start the level was I landed with this core design here, where I have basic production all the way around. I've got some RTT generators and a tier 3 production here that I can make a few of the guys that help me build these megas. And so while I was waiting for them to show up, I went ahead and grabbed a little bit of copper, a little bit of lead, put some drills down, got some water flowing. Once I eventually got my megas ready, I went ahead and dropped down some landing pads, got some of these other materials that I'm going to need a lot of, the silicon and the titanium. I have launching from other sectors. Now, that was a key element for making this level, allowing me to beat this level, was that I needed to have all those materials coming in because I've got metaglass, graphite, plastinium, a lot of the core materials coming in, as well as my core is making some from spores and things that I started with. So that gave me the materials that I needed to build, and so I could focus instead of collecting an economy on building my defense as well as my units. So I started up here by putting down some air blast drills, getting some thorium so I could maintain my core power that's going on right here. And then I used some of the thorium that was up here to plop down a few specters in this design here. And that gave me a pretty good northerner defense from air units and things that would be coming along this coast here. I also then set up some of these air blast drills with some scrap, dropped down these disassemblers that I have here to give me some just basic sand and titanium and graphite and thorium. Now the sand I used in this construction here inside the core to be able to make some silicon and run a kiln and these other things. So the sand's useful to have flowing in there. I also put another drill over here. You'll see that I have some graphite and some silicon coming in as well, just to get me a trickle of that for my general building. And in general, this was pretty good to keep me full of what I needed. I did need a little bit more graphite at some point, so I did want to add one more graphite section here, some titanium there, and that gave me a pretty good starting point. Now, to be able to win this level, because the enemy has such a big base, you need to hit them before they get to the high tier waves, and more units that coming than you can support. So I started a unit construction section back here where I have my typical design, where I have a tier 3 construction using landing pads. I made a video about this recently, so you can check out that one. And then it started producing some tier 3 units. And once I got that going, I was afraid that the computer was going to come back here and destroy this, so I plopped down some swarmers and got some pyrodite factories going up here. And then I have a schematic that goes around this that I can go ahead and just drop like right there, and that allows me to then convert this tier 3 to start making tier 4. And I can do one of them, then when I have time, I can just mirror it and then do the other like that. Now, if I wanted to make both at the same time, I do actually have a schematic that does both, just like that. Anyway, and so this started producing some tier 3 and then some tier 4. And that was doing pretty good. I was able to use these Velas to go over and do some serious damage. But as I got into the later battle, I needed something that was a little more kick, and so I made this tier 5. Now, I don't have a good schematic for this that attaches to this one yet, but I went and just dropped some landing pads with some containers, added a cryofluid mixer over here to give me the extra that I did there, and was able to produce the tier 4 guys. Now, again, that's not as nice of a design as the one with the cryofluid mixer on the side here. This gets me enough for these exponential reconstructors. But for what I had, this worked pretty good. Now, I did need some supplemental silicon and titanium because this wasn't enough here to be able to provide the thousands that I needed for here to just come from the landing pads. The landing pads just aren't fast enough. And so I added these 2 extra construction spots here. Now, my overdrive dome made everything go a little bit faster. That was not in my last video, but you can go ahead and add that easy enough. Just add a couple little landing pads there, and that gives you some pretty good construction. Now, as far as pumps go, I like to do this style of pump where I just put lines of mechanical pumps because they don't require power, and when there's tons of water, that you don't need to waste electricity to get your water. So that worked pretty well. There's not much to show around over here, just some titanium. There's some derelict structures I probably could have cleared for some more space, but didn't end up needing that. Anyway, with all those units that were being produced, as well as the units from my core here, I was able to march over here and build this defensive line here with the Spectres. There's 2 bridges here that kind of slow down the enemy and funnel them into there, and I figured if I can just get some Spectres with some thorium here, that should be good enough to take down those lines of enemy units that were coming. Now, these are pretty expensive, but they're also really good. They have a really long range, and they just deal a lot of damage. The shortcoming here was getting enough thorium. There wasn't a lot of thorium production nearby, but I was able to pull from this air blast drill and get enough there to keep the enemy at bay. But I wasn't comfortable with the enemy as they were getting more and more of them, so I went ahead and dropped some cyclone, a double line of cyclones here. And that was going to give me a different unit or towers that require a different ammo. In this case, metaglass. And so if these ever run out of thorium, then I had a backup with the metaglass. Now I have 1,000 thorium stored here, as well as all the thorium stored on these bridges. That's wasn't likely going to happen, but they do send a lot of units, and it's just a constant trickle of them, and so you have to keep on top of that. So once I had this battle line set up here, I went ahead and dropped another production set down here that I was able to produce a few more tier 3 guys. Dropped some water there, to get that production going. Now this here I didn't build until after I destroyed the enemy base. Now if you watch my video that I showed at the beginning of this that shows enemy base, you can see there was an enemy base here on this gray part that I blew up, as well as one over here. There was a core in there, and once I defeated that cleaned up a lot of the enemy's ability to, a lot of their units which went derelict is what I'm trying to say. As you can see, all these extra derelict buildings here. Now, this was the easiest path for my units to go anywhere, so I wanted to make sure that I had this part covered, and this is also where the enemy was going to come from. So I had my army sitting in this area, as you can kind of see right here, and then I marched straight up through here, and as long as my army was in the way, I didn't need to build a lot of defenses, though at one point I did lose most of my army, and so I went ahead and built a few defenses as well as some power production to keep this defended from, boats or other things that might come along this way. Then I went and dropped this tier 5 construction site here, and this one is an all-in-one design that I have that goes all the way to 1 to 5. Minus, I guess it's not quite fully all-in-one because I have to have the cryofluid produced over here. I have a few extra liquid containers to store the cryofluid while these things are producing or waiting to produce the units. Not a fully optimized design, but it is an all-in-one, works pretty quick. You just drop it down, make sure that these are receiving material on this place, and you're pretty good to go. And you can get tier 5 units coming out of there. Now, if you want to change to air units or ground units or water units, you have to just change this ground factory down here to your air unit, and you're good to go. And then if you do water units, you want to make sure you place this close to water so they can go off. All right, so now when I was doing a lot of my fighting, I had a lot of the Velas as well as the tier 3 dagger or tier 4 daggers. The Velas were great because they can take off and fly, and they're very mobile, so they're very powerful and mobile. They can, yeah, they have a really nice gun that can shoot through the walls, damage buildings behind it. Worked great. It wasn't until late game that I got a few Corvuses. They have a really good range, but they weren't very good for getting places. You can see how slow they are. Definitely really slow. So I'm going to go ahead and swap this to making daggers. Now, I also had a few of these things called quasars. And these things were great for flying around, providing mobile shields. You can actually station them above your guns, and they give you a shield that's smaller, doesn't require power. So just a nice thing to have floating over your army because it keeps them defended pretty well. So then I marched up here. The enemy had a base here. You can see in the beginning of the video, I show off that they have a pretty substantial defense here with lots of guns. So if you come over here and you attack at a diagonal, that way they can only hit you with one gun. You can hit them with your whole army, and then you can spread your way through and start marching, destroying. And then instead of marching straight up, I went ahead and just marched to the right, conquered this whole section here. There wasn't a core, and that was okay. This was mainly just to make it so that I didn't have as many of the guns that could shoot long range shooting at me and bothering me. So marched through there, destroyed a lot of that, and then I came up here to destroy their main base, and they had a lot of guns, and it was super annoying, especially when they would have these foreshadows, because those things should snipe my army from a long way. So granted, the Corvus is pretty good at shooting a long way, but it was so slow. It would often aim at their units rather than their buildings, and if you told it to target the building, it would sometimes march forward and get hit by the building. It was kind of annoying. In which case, the Velas were pretty nice because I could just pick them up, have the other guns or other guys like the Fortress and my Rain take some of the damage, fly forward, drop them, and then just start shooting. Pick them up, and they're done, and fly back, and then they would repair each other. The Velas were just great in general because they could heal all my units as well. So they heal, they provide pretty good firepower, and they're very mobile. So they're one of my favorite units in the game. Anyway, so it took me a lot to just kind of punch through this, and as I was destroying it, I was able to destroy a lot of these factories that they kept producing tons and tons of units. And the more factories I got, the less I had to worry about my defenses getting breached. And there was their air defense or air factories were up here producing a bunch of things, and it I never was able to quite get to those, but there were some ground unit stuff, I think in here, and I just kind of slowly I set my army off to the side and just kind of punched through it with some long range guns, and then I would send volleys of guys at it, and I lost a lot of guys, but eventually was able to destroy these foreshadows that were shooting at me and get to their core, which was right here. And really the way I destroyed the core was I had some of my ground units taking the heat, blew up my Velas, dropped them, and then they just pummeled that spot, right, where the core was, and did pretty good damage. So anyway, that's kind of the approach that I took to this level. I wish I had recorded it, but it was an hour and a half long, and I'm not sure you'd want to watch for that whole duration because that is kind of a long video. Anyway, it was a pretty fun level. I'm not going to win any awards for speed at destroying that, but for the first time playing it in V8, I thought it was not bad. Anyway, I hope this was helpful if you go to play this level, or as you play other levels, just some ideas on how to approach your defenses and your unit production and getting ready for attacks. Anyway, that's all I have. Thanks for watching. See you later.